What's going on, everybody? It is your boy Zamboni. I am an herbalist and astrologer, and it is time to talk about the astrology of the week ahead. Thank you so much for being here on this, my very first email newsletter event. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sending me a tip via Venmo, Cash App, PayPal. Thank you for joining the membership. Thank you for sending me a DM that says thank you sincerely. I really appreciate all of these things. Thank you so much. Let's talk about the astrology of the week ahead. So this week, we have a few major things going on here, and I think of it as a kind of reorientation. So what we've got here is, in the first place, we've got new moon in Gemini. New moon in Gemini is going to happen tomorrow. So new moon in Gemini is, so for the past 2 years or something like that, we've been having new moon in Gemini would be eclipsed. And so we don't have eclipses in Gemini anymore at this point. And so this is a regular new moon in Gemini. So I've heard some people on the internet being like, yay, like it's so much easier. This is less fraught for Gemini and Sagittarius as well. This is like a nice time. Here's what's going on. The rest of the week, we also have Mercury stationing direct. So this means that Mercury is as slow as possible right now, right? So Mercury is still moving backwards at the time of the new moon, but then also but stationing at that moment. So Mercury is going to be at 26 degrees of Taurus more or less all week. And so a stationary Mercury, that's not our favorite. When we think about Mercury as whenever I talk about Mercury, I always talk about transportation, communication of all sorts, all the trans stuff from here to there, right? And so if we're thinking about from here to there, then stopping doesn't take you from here to there, right? So that's Mercury not doing the Mercury things very well. Also, at the time of the new moon, the Mercury is still technically moving backwards, only a few minutes at a time, but so backward and stopped. This is not prime Mercury. This is not, so even though this new moon in Gemini isn't getting worked in any kind of hard way, you know what I mean? It's not, the last new moon that we had was in Taurus, and that one was conjunct Uranus, so there was like all this wildness and everything, and so it's not that, right? But we'll notice that Mercury, who is slow and retrograde at the time of the new moon, is also on the eclipse degree. So we just had 2 weeks ago, we had a big full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio. And that was at 26 degrees of Scorpio. That is where Mercury is. Mercury is at 26 degrees of Taurus. So Mercury is caught up in that drama, whatever it is, also square to Saturn at 25 degrees of Aquarius. So this is like, so although the moon is not in that rough spot, the ruler of the moon is in the rough spot. You know what I mean? So so Gemini is not done yet, is kind of what I'm saying here. Gemini is still, honestly, for the rest of the year, we're still going to be seeing stuff in Gemini. Now, as Mercury turns direct this week and is going to start going forward again, this is going to improve all of our Mercury and Gemini significations. Also, once Mercury gets back into Gemini, that's not going to be this week, but the week after, once that happens, then we're going to see some great Mercury in Gemini. There's some really good elections. So if we're thinking about Mercury and wanting to get good Mercury out of Mercury in Gemini, out of Mercury being at home in domicile, able to do the Mercury things from a Mercury perspective, if we want to get in on that, then Mercury in Gemini pretty soon is going to be pretty good for that. And that's going to be good for sort of ordering things in a way that makes sense. But one of the things that we need to remember with Gemini is that it's a mutable sign. By mutability, we mean adaptable, we mean changeable, we mean that Gemini is many things, but consistent is not among them, right? Gemini is flip-floppy by nature. And so, if I said that about a senator, then they would take that as an insult. But if it's just what it is, then how can we make that helpful? That's what Mercury does. Mercury goes back and forth, right? So how can we make flexibility something a priority, or how can we incorporate flexibility into whatever it is that we're trying to do? I've been talking about that for a while with Uranus and Taurus. Also with all this eclipse stuff, I've been talking about things changing quickly and unexpected developments, surprises, all that sort of stuff. This is going to continue to sort of double down on that. And so how can we incorporate flexibility into the MO on a regular basis, in order to continue to move toward our goals? Just because we have to move oblique around obstacles sometimes doesn't mean that we don't have our goal, our end goal in mind all the time, right? And that's always what I talk about a navigational mindset. If we think about navigation of a ship around an iceberg or something like that, and also Mercury is often thought of as the steersman. If we think about the chart as a ship, then Mercury can be thought of as sitting at the helm. At least, Mercury has his joy in the first house. We can talk about all that, but that's beyond the scope of what I'm talking about right now. What I'm saying is that this navigational mindset, this ability to be like, okay, we got to go that way, but that way is blocked right now. And so we're gonna have to go around, and we're gonna have to take an oblique path. Mercury in Gemini and all this Gemini stuff that's coming up here is going to want to move in that direction. So that's something to sort of like remember about our Gemini and our Mercury stuff, that that stability is not among our significations. And so we shouldn't shoot at stability. We should shoot at flexibility. How can we be more flexible, even if what we ultimately want is a stable place to stay, or a stable partnership, or whatever it is, right? Something reliable and this kind of thing. How can flexibility take us toward that goal? And thinking with that is going to be something really important. The other thing that is really important this week that's going on is Venus has now moved into Taurus. That actually happened yesterday, but because it was at the end of the week, that I saved it for this week. Venus moving into Taurus, while at the same time Mars moves into Aries, has been in Aries for a week or so now. This is really interesting for a couple of reasons. Mars rules Aries, Venus rules Taurus, right? Mars and Venus are also opposite to each other. So we can think about Mars rules Aries, opposite to Aries is Libra. Venus rules Libra. Venus rules Taurus, opposite to Taurus is Scorpio. Mars rules Scorpio. So there's an opposition, there's a natural opposition here. This natural opposition is also showing up in the eclipses that we've been seeing. So we've been seeing eclipses in Scorpio and Taurus. Scorpio ruled by Mars, Taurus ruled by Venus. So if we think about eclipses, and we think about Uranus being in this space, and we think about all the unexpected and surprising things, we've been thinking about instability. One of my favorite things to talk about with Uranus and Taurus has been necessity is the mother of invention. As there's a little bit of pressure coming in from that Saturn square, then that pressure shows us how there's a need to innovate. And so we have to try some new stuff. We have to experiment and do things, right? I've been talking about that for a long time. So with that kind of stuff in mind, then we see now that Mars and Venus are in domicile. So there's been a lot of disruption. There's been a lot of surprising, unexpected stuff. But now the rulers of those houses which have been disrupted are in domicile again. Mars has the benefit of Jupiter nearby, also has the benefit of a sextile to Saturn. So this looks like a pretty stabilizing kind of Mars. I don't know that Mars in Aries is stable. Comfortable is maybe a better way to talk about that. It's like getting a handhold. You know what I mean? Like imagine that you're like rock climbing or something like that, and it's been for a little while. Every time you try to grab a rock, then shit come off and then fall down. You know what I mean? And like every time that happened, you're like, like I was gonna put my hand there and it looked like a good idea, but I guess that's not gonna work. Right? Mars and Venus moving into domicile feels like, okay, I am still on the side of this rock face and maybe didn't expect to be here, something like that. But now at least I have something solid to hold on to. That Venus isn't really gonna have a nice time in Taurus as much as we want to. Every time I see Venus in Taurus, I'm just like, I want all of the most delicious things. Please bring me the sexiest, foodiest, most comfortable, bring me all of the sensory delight. This time we got a square to Saturn, you know what I mean? Square to Saturn, an overcoming square from Saturn in Aquarius. It's just like, we have to do the Venus-Saturn things. Right? And so Venus-Saturn things are not as delicious as we might want them to be. They can be, Venus-Saturn, especially in fixed signs, there might be some longevity there. There might be something enduring about that. If I were going to think about Venus in Taurus as being like lovely or something like this, and then add some Saturn to that, I might think ride or die or something like this, right? Like forever or something, you know, but not passion. Not like, oh, this is the sexiest whatever, right? That's not, I mean, Saturn, all 7 planets can get kinky sometimes, right? And if we were going to do Saturn, then we might do like chains or something like this. And like, and Venus, you know, like Venus and Taurus is going to be into the shibari and all that, right? Like totally, I get it. But, you know, like that's, sexy is not how I feel about this. Contracts is usually how I feel about Venus and Saturn together, you know what I mean? And this is Saturn in the overcoming position also, so Saturn is going to win this interaction. Also, Venus is gonna have to deal with the nodes and Uranus as well, so Venus has a lot on her plate. There's gonna be a lot going on here, and it's not all necessarily going to be easy. However, Venus being in domicile, we can recall that for the last few weeks, Venus has been in exile in Aries, and not only that, has been square to Pluto as well. That's super volatile. That's very emotionally charged. There's a lot of feelings taking place there, and not necessarily a clear idea of how to deal with all of those feelings. Whereas in Taurus, there's a sense of like, yes, I'm having all of these feelings, but these feelings are normal. I'm used to feeling feelings like this. And if I am thinking about Saturn, then it's likely that I'm going to feel feelings like this for a long period of time, or I'm going to want something like this for a long time, or you know, this has been consistent for whatever period. And what does that mean for me? How do I feel about that? These kinds of things like this. So as we see Venus and Mars in domicile, then I feel like we're gonna get a little bit of clarity around whatever has been going on with the eclipses, especially since it's not eclipse season anymore, right? We've got this new moon in Gemini, so the eclipse season is done for 6 months, for 5 months. So since we are not so close, like when it's all up in your face, then it's like, it's hard to, you know, it's just a lot of feelings, and it can be difficult to sort of have a reasonable sense of what's going on. Now that we've got a bit of distance there, we've also got planets in domicile, and a fair few planets in domicile at this point. We've got Saturn in domicile, we got Mars and Venus in domicile, the moon will be in domicile sort of, you know, in the, well, not sort of, the moon will be in domicile for a piece of this week. There's a bit of sort of at home, comfortable, I know how to be me energy in the sky at this point. And so this might be a moment of returning to that. With Venus and Taurus, I always encourage feet on the ground, barefoot on dirt, on grass, on something like that. Bare feet on the ground is going to always, feet love the ground. That's feet's favorite thing, is the ground. And that sort of return to sensory stability, that return to electromagnetic harmony, feels really resonant with all of the Taurus stuff that's going on here. There's so much wildness and there's so much disruption and chaos, but feet still love the earth, and the earth still loves your feet. And it feels like there's some stability to be had there, or some stability is not the word I want. Together? That's the word that's in my head. Thank y'all for listening to me. I'm about out of time here, but thank you for being here with me and listening to me ramble and try to figure it out. That's what I'm really doing here. I'm trying to figure it out. And thank you for rocking with me. Let me know how it's been going for you. Leave something in the comments, and I love you very dearly. Thank you for being here. If you want to send me a tip via Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, that's always super helpful. It has literally been helping me to live, to get by, and to continue to do this work. Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to seeing y'all next week. Peace and blessings, fam.